Okay. So we saw the two inyonim when we get to the yachas of Chochmah and Etzem HaTainug. Aleph, that we described Koyach HaChochmah as a Masuva of Tainug. Tainug was a Sibba to the Chochmah. And then we said that the Shorshi HaRishoin be'emes Etzem HaTainug was and became Inyan HaChochmah. The Inyan HaChochmah was Dova Echad. And we're still going to bring down at the end of the Ois a quote from the Likutei Torah. We're going to mention a passage in Likutei Torah. But over there, the Alter Rebbe uses the expression that Chochmah and Tainug, B'Shir Shom Achasheim V'lo Yiporedu. That's the expression he uses, that they're one and they're inseparable. And here the Rebbe uses the expression even more than that, that really they're one and the same inyan, that Chochmah is nas, so that Tainug nas inyan HaChochmah. So we suggested, and also from the Hemshech HaLoshen, we saw that the Rebbe used the expression umuva, dispashtas HaChochmah, hu rach meha oros HaTainug, ubchinas pnimis HaChochmah, ubchinas pnimis HaTainug, ad shebeshorshoi makori HaRishoin, hu mamish bebchinas Tainug HaNelam HaAtzmi. That was the finish of the Lashon. I don't know if we actually quoted that Lashon in the last year, but from that we see that we could say that Ispashtas HaChochmah, L'choira, meaning how Chochmah is already a koyach in the Eser Koyches, or in the Sphira Slamaila, it's already a Sphira, and in the Sphira of Chochmah Gufa, how it's already Yored b'chinas nehisha boy in order to be mashpia into bina and so on. However, we could suggest that that's called Ispashtas HaChochmah. So there we say that the inyan of Tainug is what we might call a sibba to the inyan of Ispashtas HaChochmah, and therefore it's only a ha'ora from the inyan of Tainug. But Pnimis HaChochmah, in other words, the inyan from Atzmis HaChochmah, particularly what we've been talking here, the inyan from Chochmah Stigmoya, in other words, Chochmah had his mamish in Arich, then we have to say that that is mamish Pnimis HaTainug, until the Shorshi HaRishon, mamish B'chinas HaTainug HaNelam HaAtzmi. In other words, that Atzmi is HaTainug, that we've called here Atzmis HaTainug HaPoshut, Shemitzad HaAtzmis mamish, and Chochmah are only one and the same. They're one and the same inyan, or to use the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe, of the Achasheim V'lo Yiporedu. So l'choira, Sederish Biur, what is the mile of Chochmah ad Kerikach, what is the inyan of Chochmah? That we say that its inyone is mamish inyan echad b'shorshei HaRishon with the pshitas and atzmius oineg, and then we use the expression that in the Gilei Chochmah, so when we use Kama Piyomim, the expression of sibas, that oineg and tainug are sibas HaChochmah. And now he's sort of summed it up after the wondrous mashal we had. He summed it up by saying that the Aspashtas of Chochmah, in other words, Chochmah has already become a koyach nimshach towards the other inyanim of Sphiras. In other words, the Chochmah is mishpashet into the hemshach of the Gilui HaSphiras, is that's only from the ha'ora of the Eineg. But Pnimis HaChochmah, that's where we say it's mamish inyan echad, inyan ha'oineg. So that's what we suggested last time, that we could say that the inyan of a sibba is a derech rochik. It's not a inyan fanil of a olo to a masuvav, as we explained on numerous occasions. So therefore, it's possible to suggest that calling Chochmah as masuvav, that oineg aposhet is a sibba to the inyan of Chochmah, we could say that that's al derech with the inyan for yesh miyayim. And so we see that Yesh Mi'ayin Mitzad Echad is Tacharochik from the Yesh is Rochik Mi'ayin. Over Leidach, it's only the Ayin, how he is Atzmi, he can produce the Yesh. And Le'achri, once the Yesh has become whatever he is, then the Ayin has to be Nimtza by Tomid. In other words, there's then a Gilui of the Ayin in the Yesh, Ad Kedikach, that the Yesh's whole Metzias is really the Ayin. So we could say that there's hidden in the whole concept of Siba and Mesuvav, there's hidden this whole profound Inyan of B'Shor She'arishan, they're really Inyan Echad, Yesh Loimah, that Davki, because ultimately the Inyan of Chochmah is really Miyuchad, V'lo Yiparedu, Inyan Ha'oinig Be'etem, and the Oinig is the Atzmi, until he's Mamish the Tainuk of the Etzem Mamish, the Etzem Pnimis, the Atzmi Satanic Atzkol in Atzmis Mamish. And therefore, it produces the Gilui HaChochmah in the Seder of the Gilui HaKoiches, and particularly how it's Mishpashet, Lamata al Sasiba. Dahainu, it's almost direct Yesh Mi'ayin Mimenu, but Yesh Mi'ayin means that Sof it really is the Sof the Ayin, the Yesh is really the Ayin. Yeah, Sof the Amitis Yesh is really the Ayin Shaboy. And we only call it Ayin because it's Ayin Musak, although he's the Yesh Amiti. Dafki in the Yesh HaGashmi is Mizkala the Yesh Amiti, and Sof Metziusei Shala Yesh is really the Yesh Amiti. Yesh Loimah, that's the beer, because the Inyan of Chochmah, Sof is really the Etzer, and later it becomes in a oven of Sibu and Mesuvav. Well, that's indicatory that really the whole Metzias of Chochmah is the Oinig. So that's what the Rebbe says, that in Pnimis V'atzmi is the Inyan. It's really Hainu Hach. Really, that what later becomes the Mesuvav Mimenu, the Hainu Chochmah, is really Miyuchad B'tachas Ha'ichud. Ulai Yesh Ketzas Lefaufu B'zeh, if one can really say that the full distance with the Inyan from Yesh Mi'ayin. Because the Yesh in Shor Harishan is, I don't know how much you can really say that it's Miyuchad with the Atzmas. But maybe you can, to a certain extent. Particularly mitzad the Amiti Sinyan of what Oinig is all about, then the Nisava HaKodesh Baruch Hu, Lias Dira B'Tachtoinim, is Davki in the Tachtein, Dort in the Nisava. So we have to say that in the Nisava, in the Etzem, HaMisava is really there, mitzad the Amitias, Shleimas of the Oinig or the Atzmi, is really there, the that's the Inyan that we see here. Now, why would it be Davki B'Chochmah that we say that and not B'Shari HaInyonim? I mean, Shari HaInyonim also, Bina has a very close kesher with the Etzem, and Gvura is a Inyan from Tikboidas HaAtzmi is Chesed, we'll soon see. The Chesed may be a slightly different Inyan. But Yesh Kama Dvorim Shemiyachasim Lehem Koiches Atzmiyum or Inyonim Atzmiyum with the Inyan of the Yesh. We don't, with the Inyan of the Yesh Amiti, with the Inyan from the Atzmis or Ineg, but we don't really find it where Miyaches them to Ad Kedikat to say that the Oineg Atzmi HaKol in the Etzem Mamish becomes them. That we don't find. So what's the Inyan of Chochmah, the Davka B'Chochmah, we do say it. And the Alter Rebbe brings it over there in the Kotetet in this passage that we're going to quote shortly. But it's all like different tiulim, how Chochmah is really the place, that's where the Pnimis Oinig is Miskala B'Chulu. So we have to say that Chashavti B'zeh, maybe it goes somewhat back to that famous Hagor of the Alter Rebbe in Perek Lamed Hey. The famous Hagor, where the Alter Rebbe says over that the Inyan from Chochmah, who she'ein oirin seif, shoyra b'kol miskala b'kol shari asfiras, ela alidei shemishyachi b'chinas Chochmah tchila, and then it's mayor in all the asfiras, or adaption. And then he says, mepnei shemaiti mimoyri zal, שהחוכמה הוא בחינת אחד האמץ, שהוא לבד ואין זולוסי, זוהי מדרגת החוכמה. In other words, see the Chochma as that was hot a Madrege. Madrege means only become Shayach to Eideshu in Yonim of Yesh. And yet, on the other hand, we say that Zuhi Madrege Sa Chochma Hu Levada Ve'enzo Lo, saying it's called Echad Ho Emes. In other words, that the immediate Emes of the Atzmus is Dafka when there's another thing, and the other thing, Afal Pikain, is not really there. That's Kilu Echad Ho Emes. That's the immediate Gilu of Yecheles HaAtzmus. Maybe that's what the Rizal is Maramis when he said that the whole union of the Sibas Abriya was the Galit, Slamus Koichoisav Mea Hela Mela Kiloi. Maybe that's the Biu Pnimi B'Zeulai B'Derech Efshe. The Dafka, the Slamus HaAtzmus is to be seen Dafka when it does come about another entity, or that other entity is really him. In other words, Beide Sachen are there. It's true that there is an entity, and Matzah Shega is not real. And that's called Echad Ho'ema. And those are Chochma. In other words, the Chochma is the immediate Agilui of the Shleimus HaAtzma. And therefore the Oinig, how did the Eibush get involved in the whole Bria? He got it involved through even Oinig Kaviyot. Nisave. Where's the Emes of Nisave? Where do we see it? Dafki Chochma. Ki Chochma on the one hand is the beginning of the entity of a new Zach, and then on the other hand we say it's Echad Ho'ema. In other words, that it's mamish the immediate inyan of what the Eibush was really looking for, that there would be another inyan, that there wouldn't be. That there'd be another inyan, it wouldn't. And does it pshat echadem? Aber that's the inyan from Chochma, davki in Chochma, and therefore Chochma is the inyan from Bittel. When a meat is inyan a Bittel. But that's because it's that, because it carries out that unbelievable inyan, what the Eibush really wanted. That's the touch that the Oinig, what's the Oinig? The Oinig is Nisava, that there should come about another Inim, which of course becomes Taktoinim, Avu Zetmandos, in the way that the Eibush really means it in Chochma. Yeah, the way it's really meant to be. The ganze Inim of Taktoinim is dort in Chochma. And Mamira Chochma and his Oinig are all one and the same thing. Kein Yesh Lema, it seems to me that that's a Dabir Hadova, for what it is. And believe Lorak Letayer Kolin, no, Mitzad was Idis Dezah, Boivin Kose. And it seems to me that that's a possible beer that in a civil Pirush Boivin Kose. Now we go further. So Rabbi said, Vazu Milas Koyach HaChochma, Mashe Moichin, the godless, Haim Bekinas Avdolava HaFrosha. He said, now we'll see that Tzit Chochma is the inyan from Moichin the Gadlus, that that's where the immediate Gadlus of the Ein Seif reveals himself. Davki in the Moich HaChochma, therefore the Moich HaChochma has in itself that what the Atzmas have. Dainu Havdolavia Avrosha, the Eibush is Mudal B'tachas Mikol Abriya, and that's the inyan of Yesh Mi'ayin, that the Ayin is Mudal B'tachas Avdollah from the Yesh, even though Sokosof he really is the Yesh, he's the whole Matthias of the Yesh. And that's the inyan of Moichin the Gadlus, the aim of Avdollah Afrosha. Somebody is in a state of Emerson Amiti, inyan from Moich HaChochma, where that's Moichin the Gadlus. Al Derech Amiti is, and he's obviously from all the inyan. He's kilo. Shum Davar lo mezil to, lo mafriya lo, lo palva to. He's not even mispoil of from Managdim and all the inyanim. And yet on the other hand, he's not just a shoisik, he has every now and then he'll come out with a boom with this is the teikifah. Tkifas, ve'amitias are tkifas. That's the inyan from Shabbos. We see that Shabbos is on the one hand, that's the inyan from Menucha, what that Menucha is dafki from the Avdollah Vafrosha from the Inyone HaOilam. That's the inyan from Isa Malocha, I forgot Shmektabik from Epsa inyan. We could have to do whatever a Pu'ula, but Derech Malacha is completely out on Shabbat. In other words, you have to be in a state of Menucha, B'etzem. Yeah? And Alpha became, that's when you're really a man. That's when it's dafki on Shabbos, the mensch finds Amitius, Kiru Metzius, as you might say. That's when he's Mekader. Pinim Sinyone, Vinim von Vedasat Tfila, Vinim von Limud, Vinim von Dibur Shalay, Shalay Kedibur Bechoyel, all the Inyonim, the mentions Kira a tuig of a Matthias on Shabbat. You know, there's a bottle dikhe where you know he just rolls around, you know, from one chair to the other. Beliko Simon, so there's you know how do you call it, Kenyan in the whole inner. On the contrary, he's really an active partner on Shabbat. Yeah, that's in the Kuda, and therefore, how do you get to that? How can you be like that? Dafka if you move down. In other words, if you move down, then you can be moved. You can be in the union. And you can even partake or do something with it, but it's a lot more valuable. On the contrary, you're kilo koveya, you're the balabot. But it doesn't mean to say that the Havdalah is Havdalah mitzad. If I get me involved, no, it's going to be valuable the Havdalah. The Havdalah is there, even if there will be a certain involvement. After Pekain, the Mudal, he remains the balabos amitis after the situation. And the Father said, that's what he goes on to say. The Gimel Rishaino is Kesa Chokma Bina. What Gimel Rishaino is the Dimitis from Chokma, because he's in the middle, and Kesa is anyway Shat to Chokma, and Bina is anyway, you know, as Pashas or Begili from Chokma. Hein Bekinas Hashabaj Shebechol Partsuf. In every Partsuf, in every Gili of the groups of the spheres, the Moichin Shebahem, and Befrat the Moichin the Ava Shebahem, the Inyan from Chochma, they are the Inyan from Shabbos. And therefore the Talmud Chochem, but his Inyan is the Inyan from Limud, he's called Shabbos. You come over in the Zohar called. In other words, wherever you got the Amiti is Kesach Chochma Bina Shebekol Inyan, then that's a Shabbos Shebekol Inyan. Yeshu B'chinas Menucha, B'chinas Avdolah. Well, in other words, what is Emes Menucha? Definitely when you're, not means you ran away and hid. Menucha is when you're in a situation, or you're not there. You're in it, but you're, as it were, in charge of the whole thing. Lefi Ayinonim Shulchan. And it's not available you, and it's not mafriya, other people what you might be there. That's a miti senior for Avdolah. Avdolah implies that you're there, but you're not there. Once again, that's the miti senior of Moichin Hamitiyah. Adafar, he says that's the union of Shabbos. What it's a union from Manucha, because it's a union from Avdolah. Adafar, nothing kilo gets in your way on Shabbos. Ein dov hama valbo. Why is that? Who brings a tainug? Tainug, who brings helem canal? We pointed out tainug seen in the Davke Avdolah, and we retreat helem in the Atzmi. Rotzen is the in for the reader, but Chitoni is ha'olam. Aber tainug in Yoni is the in of Aliyah Vistaugas, Beteira Etzem, and that's the in von helem. Okay, gam moichin de gadlers, hein beginners Avdolah, and since moichin de gadlers, their inen is how they're makabel from the mitis inen of oineg, and oineg Gideoni is helem Avdolah, therefore moichin de gadlers also like that. They're there, but they're not there. And therefore you see a mensch, but he's really goes about moichin, as you say, he's there and he's not there. You know, you can see that he's there. He might even be, partaking somewhat in the conversation. But you see that really he's not there. Ulo Sham. He's really inyonim nailim ugevoyim. But it's just mitzad the goydel Havdolah. It's possible for him to also, be. But he's a derek mishtatif in the Matthias Advar, and it's not a stira one to the adek. That's the miti sini for Avdolah.
Like the Rebbe said at Fabringens.
Huh?
Like the Rebbe during Fabringens.
Yeah.
This is the Maimon.
Yeah. You can see it was completely elsewhere. Completely. Yeah. Nonetheless, what had to be said was said. What had to be done was done. And I was going to say that you saw that. Bechlal in the Rebbe, in all of his inyonim, Mitzadech, he was B'tachas Avdolah. Dafke because of that. He was B'tachas Isarvus in the inyonim, aber, even from Kviyas inyonim, even fixing Matthias, not being governed by the Matthias. But Dafke Kol inyonim was to, as it were, guide and determine the Matthias. And that's a peridiki. That's even from Moichin de Gadlers. Das mitzad the shayches of Moichin de Gadlers, Tainu Chochma, with Pnimis Oine. That's mamish, these inyonim is so peridiki. V'alpizeh, Yuvan, now we'll go back to our original Shaila, that we said that the Indian from Gulgulta, which is in Rotzen Gufa, the Rotzen Sheba Rotzen, we said that over there was Meir only Chitanius Atik. Mashin in Chochma Stimoa, which is Chochma in Atik, in Arich, over there we said was Meir Pnimis Atik. And we said, how can you say that Chochma being lower than Rotzen should be a clear to the immediate in a Pnimis Atik, Mashin in Rotzen. So the Rebbe said, according to all these Biyunim, we'll now be able to go back and be Mavaya, that Loshen. מה שאיסה בזויה או בעת חיים, דבגולגול מאיר אחיצניוס עתיק, בבחינס מקיף, not bebchines islapshus pnimi, and therefore the Golgotha is in Yonah Iza, in Shel Makiv. He surrounds the Moya, but he doesn't enter here. Of a Chochma Stimoa, which is the Chochma underneath Golgotha, Meir bebchines pnimius atik, bebchines pnimius, or bebchines islapshus mamish. What islapshus mamish means that it becomes, absolutely there. In other words, that it becomes completely united and involved, as the old Rebbe's lesson is over there. Echodaim v'lo yipor, lo yiporeidu. Said the Rebbe, our question was at the beginning, Are rotzen l'mayla mibchinas ha-chochma? Golgotha is rotzen. And that's l'mayla meaning in ha-chochma. Is how come you say no, the Dafki in the rotzen is meya only chitanius atik, only chochma stimoa is meya pinimius atik. Yeah, well, if you are now, move on. The BMS ha-rotzen hu l'mayla b'meshu b'chinas atzmi meya nefet. Avade, Rotzen is l'mayla mi chochma, because chochma is only a koyak mi anefesh. Mashekin Rotzen is the yin of an atzmi mi anefesh. He's mamish from the atzmi to the nefesh. Aval, hu b'chinas chitanius ha'atzmas. Now what do we mean the whole time by chitanius ha'atzmas? Not that it's a chisoren, not that the word chitanius plays it down. But what it means is that it's a amshocha from the atzmiyas, which goes over the whole of Ishtalshalas in a form of makif, because Inyona is dafki to be mishkala in the chitonias, or Inyonim particularly lamata in pashtas, or Inyonim and in gashmis v'chulu, even in mitzvahs araya b'gashmis oilam v'chulu v'chulu. Edafar says the Rebbe, it's the Inyan for chitonias ha'atzmas v'al kain bo arotzim b'chinas makif levad shu b'chinas chitonias. Once again, not chitonias in a bad way, but it's always meya, but with a tuichif godel, but always in an even for maki. Kisof, it's the inen of the asmas, how he made himself shayat to chitonias oinyon. Ve'ena tainuk siba elo, and we saw that they can be independently. In and a rotzen is independent, and it's meya independently from tainuk, and tainuk is meya. It's just that occasionally they interact. But then it's only a ha'ori mahir. Therefore, that which is meya in the inim from rotzen is only a ha'ora from the oinig, and therefore chitanius atik is meya in the Golgotha. V'achokma imi yoisha ena atzmi, because the chokma is already a gila, it's already a koyak, it's already become a nakuda, part of the seder, the esesphirat. Yeah.
I think you skipped the line.
Oh, I skipped the line today. I'm sorry. V'achokma imi yoisha ena atzmi. Where am I? Well, okay. Mashameya boy mechidas hatainu, who is pashtas ha'ora se levat. Yeah, I think that's what we're holding, isn't it? Yeah. That which is meya in the inifan oinig from rotzen, that which is meya in rotzen from oinig is only as pashtas ha'ora, as we pointed out earlier, where they combine, it's only a ha'ora from the union of atik is meya in rotzen. Therefore, in the Golgotha is meya only a chitonias, which is the union of chitonias atik, as he pointed out. Ve'achokma imi yoisha ena atzmi sibosei u'atainu v'hu mahusei be'etem. In other words, that even though chokma has already become a specific, and even in our Indian here, chokma stimoa has already become a koyach in Arich itself, underneath the meaning of rotzen. So the first appearance of the spheres araya klulim b'techa rotzen, chokma stimoa. But nonetheless, we say that dafke there is miskala pnimius Atik, and he said that's because even the way Chochmah later becomes a Koyach, then it's Sibo, meaning it's all the Koyach Haisavas, everything that makes it be what it is really the inyan of Oineg, and Humahu say Be'etzim. In other words, we go into the Etzim of Chochmah and the Etzim, how the Tainug is B'Shorshei, then they become one inyan, and they are in effect one inyan. V'lochein, so the Rebbe kommt er gesagt mit der Schöres Pnimis Atzmis Chochmah, then Hu V'Oineg ein Mamish Lo Yeparedo, Mamish inyan Echor. Therefore, the inyan van Chochmah, how it's Meya, I'm sorry, the Oineg, how it's Meya Afila B'Koyach HaChochmah. But the inyan there, the inyan van Chochmah still more, is Meya Bo'even Atzmius or Pnimius Mamish. And that's what we're going to see. That later becomes the principle of Pnimius Abba, who Pnimius Ati. However, said the Rebbe in the brackets, he writes an amazing thing. Since the fact that Etzem HaChochmah and Etzem Oineg are sort of related, and they are one and the same Mahus, Inyan, Lochein B'Amshochas Atzmus HaChochmah, Nimshel Pnimius V'Atzmus HaNefesh Mamit. Dainu, the Atzmus HaTainug, how it is the Atzmius of the Nefesh. And here when we say, we're going to see that the Atzmius HaChochmah, we don't mean Moichin in the sense of Hasoga or understanding, but we mean the Pnimis V'Atzmius of Chochmah B'Shorshei V'Atzm. Ukemoi Be'Hoiloda, She'atipo Nimsheches Mi'atzmius HaMoyav, Shebo Etzem Koech HaChochmah, Ve'etzem HaTainug, Shemoilid B'Doima Loi, Mahus Nefesh Mamish, Shenoisen Loi Ko HaAtzmius Loi, Ad Sheyochol Liyos Yofi Koech HaBen, V'Kameshikosu B'Moken Acher. In other words, it's so great is the Amshocha, the Atzmius of the Mensch in Hoiloda, that we see that he gives even more than what he really appears to ever have. He gives more than what his Etzem really seems to be, even if you get to his Etzem. That's Yofi Koech HaBen Mikoech HaAv, meaning that sometimes the Ben can produce a Zochan Einyonim, what we didn't even see klar in the Av. Where does that come from? That he gave him Mamish Atzmius Pnimiusi Ve'atzmusi. What there we have to say Ein Hagbolas. Mitzad Eizi in Hashgacha Proteus, and mitzad in the way it's meant to be nimshach into him, then the Eibush only allows a certain amount of it. Mitzad the shleimus of the Atzmius of Chochmah, anything could be, because it's connected with the Atzmius Pshitas of the Nefesh. But the Eibush didn't want by him, for whatever reason, that it should come all of it in the Giloi. Obviously, since he gave all of that, and maybe even more, in the union of Hoilodose as Benoi, and therefore it could be that the Eibush will allow by the Ben that it come out. But take a fiskal. And therefore you can have Yofi Koech HaBen Mikoech HaAv, because it's all there, kolul in the Atzmius Moyach of the Father. Would there anything can be? Mitzad that Yichu with the Atzmius, Mamish anything can be. HaKol Echol Yod. Mitzad Shleimus HaEtzem. Therefore, we'll have to say that the fact that by the Father didn't come out, well, that's only because the Eibush doesn't give all. It's like a Inyan von Hashgacha, the control of the knobs, as you might say, by the Atzmius Eitzof himself. But he's anyway connected with the Atzmius as a Nefesh. And Mamela is good, the famous Bio, the famous Taich, Yofi Koech HaBen, Mi Koech HaAv. That Yofi Koech HaBen, that he's better than the Father, Mi Koech HaAv, that comes from the Koech HaAv below. And that Taich is Nimtzim B'Drusha Chesidim. It's not just a Taich word. It's a Taich Emet. Here we see the two inyonim, the inyan of an Etzem HaTainug, Etzem HaChochmah, and Atzmius and everything. We see all these three inyonim come together here. So that's it. In the inyan from the Hoiloda, all of them play some inyan, because it's well known that the inyan Yichud is connected with the inyan Shel Oineg. It's what's mamshik. The inyan of the Yichud is the inyan Shel Oineg. Oh, that Oineg is a Oineg Atzmi, and becomes mitzad the Atzmius of the Nefesh. And therefore, the inyan from Chochmah gets involved, because Chochmah and the Atzmius of the Nefesh are all one and the same inyan, and Chochmah being as it is mamish the inyan of the mahus, of the nefesh, and it comes together with the inyan ha'oinik, and both of them are inyan shel gilu in the inyan ha'ilad, because that's what he says, noisen loy, he literally gives him. The inyan from the yichud is a tremendous inyan that he actually gives, because normally these inyanim are $5, we just pointed out. The inyan of that yichud is that it becomes an inyan for nasina. If it's a nasina, then it's kol ha'noisen mitzad ha'etzem noisen, kol ha'noisen b'ayin yovi noisen. In other words, that he gives, as you might say, everything he has, and even more, ein arois more, because it comes from mamish mitzad ha'etzem, which may not be begolo mitam ha'yidu aloyes bar. Why didn't the whole Shleimus Etzem come by him? And more of it comes by the Son. That's a shot of Bashkocha Proteus Mam. That's about Zevure. Mamere, that's what the Rebbe says. He said, we see that all these three inyonim, Atzmiyas of the Nefesh, Tainug, and Chochmah, all of them come together in this amazing thing called Hilod. Von dem kommt das. The whole inyan von Hilod is gore, pille to get out. It's mamish. And all these inyonim, and then a mavaya, one the other. Yofi koyach haben, mi koyach ha'av. It really comes taka from the koyach ha'av. Of a pashas, it can be more than, in the simple pirush of the Lashon, it can be taka more than. Favuas, because in etzem, ein hakbolet. The etzem is sholim by everybody. With the same shleiman.
But the Tainug in the Inyan of Yichud is Tainug of Nefesh HaBahamis, no?
No, well, it depends. It depends, it depends how, how you look at it. It depends how you get involved, I guess. Ein Nachamid is a famous Gemara, what the Gemara says that the Biksha HaChachomim, they wanted to be Mavatal, that Yetzer Hara, the Gemara, Masecta Beita, Bikshu, and it's off. There's no Lohelot anymore, even though I think even the Bali Chaim weren't having any children or any young, and nobody was giving birth. So they were, So, Enochanami, the Achiza, Chitonius, Pashas is some sort of I'm sure that comes in mitzad what the Gemara calls Yetzer Hara. I don't want to talk about Ad Kedi Kacha. Rufen, this is Alcha L'Sheinis, and you're there. Of there is a nachanami, a certain, that's what the Rebbe calls Hamshachas Alev, is what you like to call it. Well, that's only that's the catalyst that brings two opposites together. B'shas Ma'aseh, the etzem is galus of the Yoinig, really comes from the Yoinig, Amidi, of the Nefesh. And therefore that's what, when it mentions Al Choponim Mishtadl, to be Mechavan, Inyonim Keile, then Enochanami, that's what is Nimsha. But it's like that everything's got a Sheres Lamaila. It's like the Shloh says, that Ater Medaberes Be'elyonim U'Meromezes B'Tatonim, not the other way around. So really what's happening is a very high Gili, the Etzem HaNefesh, and that's why there's this whole Inyan. Just to set it working, it sort of comes down into a certain, what you call Hamshachas Alev. And then afterwards, Grace Zachen, Tu in Zechop, all sorts of amazing things are happening. And Mamira, an Emsa Elach Yid, or he sees things how they are, Milmail Lamata, then that's what he's oining. He's oining b'shas that inyan, which is makasha, hard for us to understand. It's only oining shalamayla. The same with Shabbos, and that's what he said. Who Shabbos, Gimel Rishon is Shabbos. The same with Shabbos. It's brought down and says that really the oining of the achila of Shabbos is really the oining for the moich and davar, how they're mayor in the chochmas of the same thing. And that's why you're supposed to, you eat your bit of challah or whatever you eat on Shabbos, you have to eat it with a certain title, keep shutta. But then these inyonim touch off the inyonim how they are. If the kli is an edel kli, al chaponim, he has an awareness of the tainug elokipado. There is happening such a inyan, mitzat nefesh, and that's what the Baal Shem Tov said, that he saw this picture of the guy with the the strimel, Shabbos by night, the shore, the strimel, the ox with the strimel. So you have to be very careful. But then the Rebbe came along, and the Rebbe said that that's for klal. If you treat the whole Inyan for Shabbos as really having any shaytas to Gashmiel. The other famous Farbrengen was in Toshim Mem, I think it was. Yeah, the Rebbe said, B'klal Oinim from Shabbos is not really eating. You don't really need to eat. It's all famous. And with that, the Rebbe was killed being Mavaya Shittas Atzmi, because they were boiling after the Rebbe. There was some Shabbos when he didn't really seem to go home to eat an actual sort of Shabbat. But if he did, he must have done it very late, or B'doich B'alma, or B'havora B'alma.
He didn't wash. The Rebbe didn't wash.
Yeah, but there were some Shabbos where even the Rebbe didn't verbring.
Yeah.
That he didn't go home. Eat only from brain. I mean, that's not sort of Shabbos. I mean, in the winter Shabbos, he didn't eat any sort of Shabbos. He made the broch on the Mazenas, and he drank Ravi's wine, and he made a little Chaim occasionally with that. Half a dome to go and see, yes. On Kishum Bayot, was it all early big do like a Mishnah, all early, Machole Shabbos. So the Rebbe said on that Farbrengen that if those things are, they're like a principal part of the Shabbos by you, then you're already a little bit of an ox. You're already in the ox a little bit with the strive on it. You've got to realize that Shabbos, like we said here, Gimel Rishena, Menucha B'etzer, Havdalah, the Alinyonim. Make a Suda Shabbos, eat your Chalas, like a Mishnah, and you might your Mishpacha, and it has a bisschen Cholent, I mean, the Rebbe Rashab was makbid to eat Cholent. Nochazol Chinyonim. The Rebbe was Megala, a whole new Indian, that famous Sikha of the Indian from Shabbos. Is made by Rov B'nai Adam, and has to come down into some form of an Achila for Shabbos. You're not going to fast against Shabbos, particularly Anashim Ke'ercheinu, Zelov Ukach Shayach. Avu became, there has to be a certain idea, word or tutza. Just the very fact that you know what's tutz chorum, that helps and brings to a certain balance in the whole Indian. You don't just become an ox kipshuta. I'll put it that's not time. However, that's a beer here also. The catalysm, mamish down here has to go to a certain Indian would call it whatever you like. It's a certain iskalas where these Inyanim take over, and then there's an asina on the part of the Adam. But if he's mechavan to that asina, then yesh b'sek kol madrigas ad etzem ha'oine ve'etzem ha'moichen ve'etzem ha'never. I mean, the whole three musagim come together. If you know, it's dafki in that bracket. It's a pillar. The fisek from Toys. It's a pillar. But for Nemkunda is that this sin is really a tremendous sin. Dafki because of that, you have to be careful how you handle it, I guess.
Does this mean
that's what Zikr does? It's like a very delicate thing that you can't just, how do you call it, watch around with it. It has to be done in a.
Is the Rebbe trying to say here that when in the Indian of the Yichud you should feel an oinig ruchani and oinig eloki?
At the beginning, you have to have a certain
catch. But then
there has to be a choponim idea that there's also happening here very tifa in Ruchman. That's the Ikesh Badover.
You should feel an oinig eloki.
Yeah, I mean, if you're probably oish ge'avet, and hopefully that's what you'll feel. I mean, look, it's difficult to talk too high in a way that maybe you're just sort of flying beyond the realities. Although on the other hand, that's what's written here. The state of Melech Kumtais, that it's mamish like he said, I'm going to get to Shabbos. It's really a Havdalah. It's really a Havdalah. Tzadasheni, the Havdalah means you've got to be involved, but at the same time, you're not involved, if you know what I mean. And that's the closest Indian of Chassidus in a way. The Frierdiker Rebbe said you have to be in the world and not in the world at the same time. And that's a very big demand on a mensch. That's a tremendous demand. And therefore, if you know the Inyanim, how they are mitzad, miti, ashur sham, then at least it helps. And at least it gives you the framework in which to move your Inyanim, at least to know what's happening. That's l'chor mavua po. What it comes out is that soft dafki in hoylora there comes the mitish yichud of the etzem of chokma with the etzem of of the oining. The dafki there you have, and therefore the hamshach is hamshach bilti mugbelas, even though it goes to in moyach. In other words, it's the moyach how he's mamish mushrash in the atzmiyah. And that's what the Alter Rebbe. There's a little piece in Torah in the Drushim of Megillah Esther. The Alter Rebbe writes when you get to the Yichud, so he writes Yichud. In Chassidus is kimat nistor weg there. Lamav is lo chotfim al. Here the Alter Rebbe writes that when you get in Yichud by Zochar and Keva, something he writes the Veloike Moshe Seivrim Ho'elam She'ein says in Maguna, he writes Ela Dover Godel who bein Lamaila Ulamata. That's what I tell them. Dover Godel who bein Lamaila Ulamata. Ja, sorry, maar we hadden net met Nasir. Huh? No, we hadden net zo met een ander. Huh? No, we're not starting now. We're just like right in the middle. We're really sort of pushing towards here now.
Yeah.
Is a mailer? Come say. Come say the fees there. That what we were talking about, Dina van Abdullah, even from being in the world and out the world together, I couldn't tell you that that's in a good amitis of siddhas, and that's really the ultimate shleimus of the whole Indian Torah mitzvahs. That a mensch is not the way is not to run away from the world, to be in it, nor to be megalah the shorosh atzmi. And if upon me you know the shorosh atzmi, then at least it gives you a framework in which to move. Amen. The Fisher commentaries that yeah, so but that was another in Torah. The Alter Rebbe said Dover Godel who bein Lamaila or Lamata. But we don't find the interesting thing is maybe the Rebbeim were a little bit choishes to unique lechitonium and people. They should get sort of the wrong idea. I question exactly what, but we don't find references to that Inyan B'Halchova. B'derech kol b'kitza loshen, loshen tamchisi, not in a Inyan Halchova. Is Ayesh Lema that they were choishes. There should be sort of wrong interpretations or reference to it or chweis was, or not because they just wrote it off as something chweis was. That's what he says in Torah, exactly the opposite. If he's ekum to go near that, so go in your Pili place.
Once on a mimer from the Midler Rebbe.
Huh?
I don't remember where from the Midler Rebbe that Lo Yochol Yosef Litapek.
Yeah.
He's talking about Bias HaMashiach.
Yeah.
Yisod came.
Oh no, in Ein Beis, yeah, in Ein Beis, at the end of the main first temple, he writes a whole about that whole Gili Deliosi. But you can't all bear that. That's inside Yeshu Gufa. The tremendous build-up of all I suppose it just plots out. That's Gili Mashiach. Yeah. About anyway, look. Pretty close. But we do find that in the Maimorim of Siddhas, we don't find really a tremendous herch of abiyah when again in that. The V'chinas Pnimis ve'atzmis ha'chochma hu atzmus ha'tainu. From that we see, from all Hamavur Yil, that if we take mitzad the atzmiyas and the pnimiyas, then who, that is that. In other words, it's not two inyonim, and it's not even b'derech, moker. It's mamish the same thing. Hainohach. So that's what I tried to bring out before. The Maila of Chochmah being the inyan of Echad Oemes. That Chochmah is really the ultimate tainug of the Eibishter. The Hainu, there should be an entity, and that entity is really here. Therefore, they're one and the same inyan. Therefore, the Gila Pnimius Atik Amitius Pshitas Atainuk is Dafki in Chochmas Timor, not in the inyan of the Gugolta, which is Rot. Okamoi, the Pnimius Abba who Pnimius Atik Mamish, Koshchein, Chein, Bevinis Chochmas Timor. Now, the Alter Rebbe writes over there in Likutei Torah a similar lotion. In other words, Abba means Chochmah, how it's already become Abba. It's already in the spheres, and it's already a father to later Giluim. Aber the Inyan von Chochmah, how is it Chochmah Stimoya? Well, that's still in an even von Tuich Inyan Pshitas, how it's Lamaila Megillah in the spheres, is if we're going to say that Abba, how Chochmah is already a sphere in the Inyan of the spheres, it's already called Pnimis Abba, who Pnimis Atik, and then how much more so in the Inyan von Chochmah Stimoya, should be Pnimis Atik, Mamish. In other words, that even though that's also Mamish, but this is Mamish, in an even for Mamish. Like the Rebbe says, Mamish. And sometimes he even says 3 times, Mamish. Mamish. In other words, that's even more than stam mamish. That's mamish. In other words, that if we're going to say that in Pnimis Abba, then how much more so in Chochmah Stimoya? And he, so the Rebbe says, "V'yesh b'ma shezehu ma shebegilgelis mislavish chesed da'atik yoimin, or b'chochmah mislavish gilvudes da'atik yoimin." It's well known that the Gilgulta is Kaviochel a Kli to Chesed of Atik. Now, of course, when we talk about spheres in Atik, we don't really mean spheres in the normal sense. We mean different Oifani Shocha of Atik, Nikuim al Shem in a sphere. So therefore, the Rebbe says that in the Inyan von Rotzen, the Hainu Gilgulta, over there is Meir Chesed the Atik Yoimen. Ve'ilu in the Inyan von Chochmah Stimoya is Mislabish Gvulish Datikyo. V'yudua, the B'chinas HaChesed, Imi Yoisei, B'chinas HaGilui, and even more than that says the Rebbe's got the Maila V'hu Oyer She'ena Mis'aveh. There we talk about the Inyan von Is'avus Oyer. But Is'avus Oyer is really Mitzad the Inyan HaKli. But the Inyan von this kilo in the oil, the shorish of the Kli Shaboy, and that's called the Isavus idea. But he said the Inyan von Chesed has the Maila that it always remains Pshitas. It doesn't have this Inyan of what you might call the Afrulias, almost like the thickness inside the oil, which later becomes how the oil is Mishtatev, at least in the Matthias of the Keli. Mikol Mochim, Ubchinas Kitanias Levad, nonetheless that's called Kitanias. Ubchinas Gevura Datik Yoimen, Ubchinas Pnimias, Shabo Ubchinas Gevuras. Yeah, that's the Inyan von Gevura. And what is that? Tigboiras or Achmiyas. Now here we meet up with that phrase I used earlier this year, that Gevura is the Inyan von Tigboiras Ha'achmiyas. In other words, the tremendous forcing power of the etzem to make itself be nimshach. Ki mitzad atzmosei, the etzem is built-in nimshach, and built-in is gale. And the Inyan von Gevuras is in the etzem, but that's Inyan von Gevuras Tigboiras, that the etzem forces itself to be revealed. Or Malubish Pepin's Chochmah Stimoya Davke. V'ayim Mash Kosu B'Lekuti Teira B'Yabir the Seis Osis, or that's the Haftorah Pashanitorim, Seis Osis, the Sogel Nafsha Be'Elakah, or that's the Haftorah Pashanitorim. And over there's a huge mime about the Inyan von Tekiyah Shofar. Now it's Mamshi from Pnimis Ha'oineg, v'chuli, and he gets on over there to the whole beer, in the long beer, the beer is a very long beer. As in the beer, he gets onto this whole Inyan of the Inyan von Chochmah Stimoya, Davke being the Medius Hamamutza, between the Pshita, the Ein Seif and the Spheres, and Davke that is Malubish, the Atzmus Mamish, Pnimius the Atik Yoimen, v'chuli, and he differs over there in the same way that we have here, between the Inyan von Chesed, the Atik Yoimen, and Gvura the Atik Yoimen. So what's it in the Nekuda von Chesed? We see the Chesed is an Inyan of Amshocha, believe what you might call effort on the part of the etzem. In other words, it's a gilui from the etzem. Alternatively, we say that the oil is nimshik b'derech mamela mia moer. Ein b'zeh shtadlus, ein b'zeh tigboirus, as you might call it. It's at the etzem to give off the Inyan von oil. And therefore, it's got a maila, the oil miyaina moer. And therefore, in the Inyan von oil, you got this Inyan von Pshitas, that Mitius oil, how it is B'Shoshe Arishan. You have this Inyan, it has in itself this Inyan of Pshitas, which is there in any way in the etzem, even though the oil is Mudal Mia etzem Kamura. Just like all ha'oras are Mudalim, although on the other hand, they're Miyain, yeah, they have in themselves. The oil has itself the Mila, the Pshita Sayatzim. And that's what the Rebbe means here, that the Indian from Chesed is what you might call the Mamela, the Hamshocha Laloiko, what you might call effort, mitzadi etzem, to give off, and therefore it gives off Pali Hagbolas, and it doesn't even have the Shurish of Hagbola in it. It doesn't even have the senior from Afrurias, which is the koyach of these avus, the ayin, which leads to the gilui of a certain koyach hakli in the earth. Oh, that's only in the earth, which has been through the Indian from Gvuris, Be'ez Shoifa. Because the Indian from Gvuris in the Yonim is to bring to the Indian of Matthias. Emma, and the Fah says the Rebbe, the Indian from Chesed is a Indian of oil, which is believable, and Eino Misave, because it's the meat is Indian of Pshitas of the Moya, as it were. But he said it's just the Indian for Gilul, particular Inyanim apart from the Inyan Agilul. And therefore we see that Chesed just says give everything. Chesed doesn't really differentiate between one Makabel or another, or make Cheshbainas. How we're going to give the Gilui? He's a Derech, what's his Roy, what's the Nish Roy? Chesed just goes. In other words, Chesed is what you might call the flow from the Atzmi, or from the Etzim. Ilu Gvura has in itself a Maila, was Kaviyochel, the Etzim makes a deliberate effort with the Indian from Gvura. That's what we call Tigboires Ha'atzmi. In other words, that it gives the very etzem of the etzem in the Indian from Gvura. And therefore that's a very unusual thing. Because normally we say that the etzem is not mispashet. Ein nochanamik, mispashet nid. Although if the etzem makes an effort coming over within its own self, then the Indian of the etzem goes over. And that's Indian from Gvura. The Gvuris have themselves that Maila, and therefore the Liosid Lowe is going to be Davke Gvura. Yeah, and on the contrary, Beishama is going to come into the picture, because that's the Shurish of the Indian Agurais. The Indian fan Chochmas Timor or Davke, there's where the Gvur is the Atak Yoim go. In other words, that they have to force themselves in there. Yeah, and they literally, what you might call, they're jammed in there by the Etzem. It's on Koichas, Kol Yochel of the Etzem. That's a different Indian altogether to the Indian from Chesed, and albeit later on it demands a Indian from what you might call Din V'Cheshbein. And therefore the Alter Rebbe writes over there that that's the Shurish of the Charod of Sheba. He said therefore when the Sheva comes to Lamata, Bepashtas, the Kirim and Shrech and Pachat, because that's the Indian from Gvuris. Because Pnim is what's happening with the Gilui HaShoifa is this thing, that the Avis is being masking to join himself up. He's all etzim together with the whole Chasna, and how does he do that? Chochmas Timor, Davki in. He's got to bring his Tachlis Oinig into something. Where does he do it? In Chochmas Timor. And therefore the Shoifa is that in it. The Shoifa is the Yisoidorus of Chochmas Timor, how it's going to make itself into a Makabel, to be Makabel from the Etzim Mamish and from Gvurisayat, Tikboider Sayat. Well, it's a pillar dikizach, and that's what he says. Why much closer? But the so he says it. That's what he stated. That's what I've just given you over. That's what's written over there. I come to Sikor Pili plus dikizachen, and the Indian from Gvuris are much more pneumistic, and they're much more the ultimate, what you might call, what we're looking for in the whole Indian from Gilui Hadvorim, than what the Chasodim are. The Chasodim are a tremendous, how they call it, give, but they're not the, what you might call the giving with the whole etzem of the kiva. They're just therefore they have themselves pitas, they have themselves inyanim, but the Gvuris of the Atik, you know, in Gvuris, well, that's how the etzem can give off something as it was separate from himself, but it's still him. And the only way that Chesed can reveal the etzem is just being a howler. And that's all even Eiloda. What's in of Eiloda? You give off a tippa, and that tippa is like a separate entity. It's a separate Matthias that goes out and is moilid padava choda. That's even from Gvuris Atik. That's got a very amazing concept, and that's what we achieve with a shofar. Then what a shofar goes, doop, 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 it goes with broken pieces. And when it does go with one coal, that's kilo. The pshitas atzvus already got through. And therefore the first Pshitas are called is like a beginning, it's like a leader. And then the Amiti sitting in the shape is in the middle with the and all those, And they say, oh, we already got it. Then the Atzmus announces that he's killed. Here he is, he's made it, as it were. Well, the way that he really makes it is through the truth and the Shvorim in the middle. I mean, so we'll just learn a couple of minutes now. We won't be able to finish the whole Indian here, but we'll just learn a couple of lines. I've got to meet somebody at 9:20.
It seems to me, from my personal experience, that Chesed doesn't come automatically. I have to work hard to.
That's
and
because
Gvura just comes
the
automatically.
in Kaptonim, obviously. Kodim is in a bit of Marugas to say, in general, for what's the base of meters was taken away from them, they got to do it. But it is mashmi, it's funny.
What?
And if we have a little trace of what's called Kapedas, Kohenim a little bit sort of breathe to commence. Therefore you have to work at Chesed. Well, once it goes, it doesn't really cost you a great deal. That's a bit. Chesed goes once it's going, it goes easy. But the Gvura is with the Kohenim, there's a Gvura. There's a Gvura Da'ava, there's Moichet Da'ava, that's this in it.
It just comes automatically.
In Panimas Adon, that's why the Kohenim are a little bit breathed, because they come from the Gvuras Datik Yom, and now they're mamish quetching the Atzmas. It does cost it cost the energy. It gives off a take of an energy. Therefore the Kohenim say, no, wait a minute, But they say we want the Beis HaMikdash now.
Yeah.
The breathers. Well, Pizeh Yuvan, Ashikos of Dir Hashem Behimotze. We start off the pasuk Dir Hashem Behimotze. Bisman Shu Motze Gam Liyochid. You remember we bought the Gemara bought the other pasuk as well. Mikel Shem Alakenu B'Chol Kol Yireinu Eilov. And then we said that means that the Aves will answer whenever you call him. And then we say no, Dir Hashem Behimotzei. He can only call the Aves when he's ready for you. Behimotzei when he's prepared for you, as it were. So we asked that kasha, and we said Kan le Yochid v'Kan le Tzibur. In other words, that the pasuk Dir Hashem Behimotzei is even for Yochid. When he's ready, then he'll take anybody. B'Chol Koreinu Eilov. That's the whole time, and that's the tzibur. In other words, the tzibur is good the whole time. A yochid is not necessarily good the whole time. So therefore the Gemara says, Eimas, when is it that this business is good? When is it himotzoi, and that even a yochid is good? As they state in the Gemara. Fragt der Rebbe the Shaila Lechoyra, Masha Kosev B'Chol Koreinu Eilov, Hari ze Gam Ken P'chinas Ein Seif L'Mala Mishtausa. Hari B'Chol Koreinu Eilov, we're going to bring from the Sifri and other places, that's also Atzmas Ein Seif. So what's the difference between the Aseres who made Tshuva, what he's ready even for Yochid, and B'Chol Koreinu Eilov, that's only the whole year around, and only for the Tzibur, not for the Yochid. Lechoyra, it's also Erin Seif L'Mayla Mishtaushel. If it's L'Mayla Mishtaushel, then what's wrong with the Yochid? Why can't it take the Yochid just like it does the Rabbi? But that's what the Sifri said. Meaning to Atzmas Ein Seif. Hainu Shelamayla Miyas Esfiras. Ava Mikol Mokimu Masha Shayach L'Ishtaushel. In other words, the B'Chol Koreinu Eilov doesn't mean mamish to Atzmas. It means to L'Mayla Mishtauselas, but not mamish to Atzmas. And that's what the part is. It's brought down Ayom Yom. This part is here is brought in Ayom Yom. Mafarish Eilov hu b'chinas ha'era mislavish be'akelim. In other words, the Eilov is not really mudal mi'a'es esfiras. No, on the contrary, it's the oil. The oil is pshitas l'fierach, or it's here amaluvish b'teich ha'kelim. B'ksovim, the Ksovim that touch in the Arizal, and the Kisva Arizal, Mavua, the Eilov hu b'chinas Atzmas Ein Seif, Shelamayla mi'eros ha'kelim datzilas. That's the inner from Pshitas Atzmas, which is even Lamayla from both Eros and Kelim. Now when we say Ksovim, it could be that he means the Ksovim or the Rabbeim, because the Ksovim can mean either the Kisva Arizal or it can mean the Rabbeim. And then it's fallen on it, the Chassidus teaches it means Mamish Atzmas Ein Seif. So there was the Rebbe, if it's Mamish Atmas ain't say, then sure what's Naraf Kimina between it and Dirush Hashem Bimot. Why should we say this can take a Yochid and this can't? When we call Mokim, say Masha Shayek Listaucheles. Ain't a it's La Maila Legamri, but it's Asia Juinian. So the Rebbe said, Bureau, according to our Biur, this will be the Chesed, Beginnes HaRotzen, or Beginnes Chesed the Atikeim, Shechol Zeh, Beginnes Chitenius, Lafierach. I mean, once again, not Cholila Chitenius in the sense of just outside things, the Shitches, Dicke Sachen, but things which can be Nimshach to the Inyan of Chitenius or Ilamas, therefore it's not the immediate Inyan of the Atzmas, even though it's already Atzmas. Yeah, okay, יש בזה עדיין חילוכים הדרגות של הציבור. It can only be for the ציבור שיכול להמשיך מבחינת המדרגת זו. But not Yochid. Yeah, Yochid can't get to that. In other words, it's not general enough. It's still got specific inyonim in it. Was the Barosh Shana Versa Shemei Tshuva, Oz Mei B'chinas Pnimis V'Atzmas Eitzei, B'chinas Gvuras Te'atik, Shemalubish B'moichin Stimoa, Shu Tikbers HaAtzmas. Kaviyachal, the Atzmas is a laying, gequest itself, as it were, to go into this level, Giloi B'chinas Pnimius Atik. And there, he can take even a Yochid. That doesn't matter to him. He doesn't have to have a big power to reach him there. It's at the Goydel Hab Shitas. But on the other hand, the what you might call the fact that the Atzmas is there in a form of Tikboidas, Atzmas can take everybody, even a Yochid. Chosaf Havai is rare kod shoy kiru v'moya el hanitzut. Chosaf Havai, he's open. He's revealed his arm. As it were, taken away all the levushim, and he's revealed the etem and mamel. It's the korav v'moya el hanitzut. Meaning the kiruv, the etzem, even to the prat. Therefore, it's good even a yochi.